All right, welcome back to 411 on Wrestling Podcast, our special weekly retro review that we're doing every Friday now. And to do this one, welcoming in our good friend Steve Cook to discuss what I know is one of his highlights as a wrestling fan, and that is the 1992 Royal Rumble. Steve, this is one that I know you always love to talk about, so thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's always a good time to talk about one of the kind of matches that kind of shaped my early time as a fan, I think you could say. And even when you look back today, the list of names on this Royal Rumble, it pretty much holds up against any other list of names you want to throw out there.
Yeah, I put that in my notes. I rewatched it earlier before we recorded this, and man, once you get laid into the Royal Rumble match itself, it's pretty incredible when you see all the different stars facing off. But we'll get to that in a minute. It is the 1992 Royal Rumble, January 19, 1992. It was at the Knickerbocker Arena in Albany, New York. And yes. Steve, I've got to say this was a favorite part for me, and I wish he still did it, although he doesn't anymore. But I would watch the Royal Rumble every year, which I usually do, but I would no doubt watch it every year if I knew that Vince McMahon was going to read off the entrance in the Rumble like he did for this one, of course, as he did for years before that. Just to hear him say Haku and some of these others, that's always a treat.
Yes, it is. You can tell that Vince enjoyed saying some names more than the others, too.
Yes, he did. He loved Haku. He loved some of the others.
Undertaker, of course.
Yes, the Undertaker. Boy, he just listening to him read them off. That's fun in and of itself. But of course, if you've watched this before, you know that the commentary, I think, certainly plays as big of a role as a lot of the other things on this card. And your commentators were Gorilla Monsoon and the one and only Bobby the Brain Heenan in what I would have to say is Heenan's masterpiece here in terms of just what he did throughout really the entire show, I thought, Steve. I mean, we'll get to the Rumble in a second, but like he just added those different seeds throughout the show, like the whole time. Like we're watching the Bushwhackers and the Beverlys, which we'll get to also in a second, that went for seemingly an hour. Heenan's just laying the seeds for thinking about Flair and what's going to happen in the Rumble, and oh my goodness, just a masterpiece.
Yes, of course. Heenan was very personally invested in this being Ric Flair's financial advisor, which I think Rick could have used a financial advisor like Bobby in later years, unfortunately. I think once Bobby got taken out of that role, there might be, I don't know if it's a coincidence that Ric Flair's financial situation got a lot worse once Bobby was out of that position.
A very good point. Very good point indeed. And this show kicked off with, we'll go into the card here. It kicked off with the Orient Express with Mr. Fuji against the New Foundation, which of course was Owen Hart and Jim Neidhart. This, Steve, didn't quite match the one from the previous year where you had the Rockers in the Orient Express, which a lot of people, I think, you look back at that match, just a classic. But Heenan, once again, I wrote this down. As soon as he come out, like it's the match starts and, Heenan's making fun. He goes, the New Foundation must have just got up. They've still got their pajamas on. And then he added a bunch of different lines like that throughout this match. I will say, seeing Jim the Anvil Neidhart in those pants for me is always strange. I guess it's the same for Owen when you look back at it. But at least Owen, he had some of the more shiny stuff at the time. He wore the purple and stuff eventually and all that. But seeing both of these guys in those pants, that is something that will get you.
Yeah, the jackets and the hammer pants is an interesting look for Jim and Owen there. And Owen would keep that look going, I remember, with Coco Beware. Yep. I thought it worked better for him and Coco as high energy to have the big hammer pants and the suspenders. I thought it worked better for them, but not so much for Owen and Jim here. And, yeah, speaking of things that don't quite compare to the past, you can tell the Orient Express, this wasn't quite their match with the Rockers. I think it was 1991 they had the match with the Rockers at Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
This one, not quite on the same level. And you can kind of tell they had one foot out the door there. You saw Pat's knockout there in his T-shirt, and he had pajama pants on too. So I think you can't tell these guys were kind of counting the days until their contracts were up, I think.
Yeah, and this wasn't, like you said, it was a good match, and really for this undercard, it was probably, I guess when you compare it to the others, I mean, may have been the best match on the undercard, start to finish probably, but still, it didn't match the level of the one of the previous year, like we said, with the Rockers and the Orient Express, but the new foundation gets the win with the rocket launcher.
The rocket launcher, yes.
Yes.
The Midnight Express there. Two comparable teams if there were ever comparable teams.
And to see them doing it in those pants made it even better. 17 minutes, 18 seconds, New Foundation gets the win. And
not one of Owen Hart's better tag teams, to be honest with you. But,
no, I
mean, nothing against Jim, and I know Jim and Owen got along fine and all that, but, Owen would have some better partners later on. His chemistry with the Bulldog was a lot better.
Yeah, it's not the one. Not the one you think back on when you think about all the tag team partners he had. That just, I don't know. Even though, like we said, the name, the ties, him and Jim don't really come to mind. But the pants, that will always be something that you don't forget for sure with those two teaming. All right, that led us into what was a pretty notable sequence here with Lord Alfred Hayes, the man, with the replay kind of documenting what happened with the Mountie beating Bret Hart for the Intercontinental title at a house show before the Rumble. You had Roddy Piper make the save on Bret after the match, then the Mountie ended up attacking Piper, and so that set up the match that we'll talk about in a second. But I went back, Steve, and I looked through, the Wrestling Observer. I looked through some other stuff, and of course, this whole sequence played out. I'm just going to read it from parts of this from the Observer because a very interesting situation here involving Bret Hart. And they had played it up talking about, Gorilla talked in the previous match about Bret having a 104-degree temperature, still wrestling the match, and then Heenan responded by saying that he didn't think that was that impressive because he once wrestled with a 113-degree temperature. So there's another Heenan line you just can't ignore. But Meltzer basically reported that, of course, this was when Bret Hart had negotiated or agreed to a deal at some point to where he would, debut at Clash of Champions for WCW, and that there was a possibility of him coming, out with the Intercontinental title and all this other stuff. But ultimately, he winds up saying that the thought process was that he was going to lose the title and Piper was going to get the title no matter what happened. So a very sort of convoluted, situation backstage here. But this was, looking back on everything, when WCW was very interested in Bret Hart the first time around. And they had still thought at this time, like reading through this Observer, like the thought was that he was still going to go to WCW at some point very soon. But ultimately that didn't happen, of course. But this was certainly an interesting situation here.
Yeah, and I think another thing was, like, the only way you could see the Mountie beating Bret Hart was if Bret Hart had, like, a 104-degree fever.
Right.
Because otherwise, I don't think the fans were really going to buy that one. And definitely, Mountie, not exactly... I like Shock. Shock had some high points. He doesn't have the theme song by this point, but later on when he has the I'm the Mountie theme song, it's a great piece of business, along with those other songs for the Fabulous Rougeaus. Great singer. The Shock was there. And the Mountie gimmick is weird, too, because it's one of those deals where they couldn't do the Mountie thing in Canada because the Royal Canadian Mounted Police was not about that. Yeah. So if you look on YouTube, you find some promos that Jacques cuts in Canada as the Mountie, and, he's saying Jacques Rougeau gets his man, it's weird, funny stuff. And, yeah, the Mountie is there, not the shining point of the Intercontinental title, but... He was just transitioning the title anyway, so it didn't. Ultimately, it made for a good moment here, I would say, at the Rumble.
Yes, it did, and Piper versus Mountie for the title. This was pretty much a very quick, like you said. I mean, this was Piper pretty much puts him to sleep at 5 minutes was around the time this match was. So not really a long match. It puts the title on Piper. And again, it's very interesting to read that, going back and what the thought process was at the time that, and this is an interesting line to me from Meltzer, of course. And there were some other reports on this, and I thought it was fascinating to look back at. But one of the things he said was, however, WCW sources indicate that Hart, who had backed out of the deal as of a few days ago, will be coming in after all in not too many months. Well, I guess if you consider not too many months, what was it? How many months that would be? I guess 6, 5.5,
a little
6
over 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you can count that in your head, that may be not too many months. But it says Hart was promised that after losing the strap to Mountie at a house show, that he would be getting it back at WrestleMania, even if it meant in a babyface match against Piper. So very, very interesting. That's one to look back on. If you're curious about how this whole thing played out here at the 92 Rumble, there was a lot going on for Bret Hart at the time, and of course we know it turned out okay.
Yeah, we can safely say that Bret Hart made the right decision there to stick with WWF, because he winds up beating Piper at WrestleMania, which was a huge win for him, because not that many people had pinfall victories over Roddy Piper. I think Piper said that nobody did. I think some people did, but yeah, beating Roddy Piper, a big deal. And Roddy Piper is not a guy who needed a belt. I mean, he was just fine without the WWF title. But at the same time, it's a big moment, as a youngster for Roddy to finally get a belt. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I did too. And like you said, this was not one that they spent a lot of time on. I think it was pretty clear they were switching the title to Piper, and that happened in about 5 minutes, and that set up the big match at WrestleMania.
Well, then you had something afterwards that took up a lot of time. I think you already said that this next match here took up a little bit of time.
Oh, my goodness, this next match. And I didn't write it down, but I want to say this thing went close to 16 minutes. Somewhere in there. I think that's about right. The Bushwhackers with Jameson against the Beverly brothers with the Genius. This was something. That's the best way I think I can put it. And let me tell you, Steve, the finish in this match, I think we're recording this, of course, the day after Snoop Dogg made his appearance on AEW Dynamite, and everyone's talking about Snoop Dogg's splash off the top and it being one of the worst splashes in the history of wrestling. Well, let me tell you right now, the Beverlys win this match, and Luke tries to make a dive to break up the pin attempt at the very last second, but it is one of the worst diving breakup attempts I've ever seen. Poor Luke. He gets into the ring like he was on the apron, and it's almost like he got into the ring too quick, and he realized, he's like, oh man, I need to slow down. And then he just does this like slow motion dive to try to break up the pin. God, this was not good. And then, of course, it plays up to Jameson knocking the Genius out of the ring after the match. The crowd loved it, but my God, looking back on this.
The Bushwhackers were a popular tag team, boy, I'll tell you that. I was more a sheep herders guy myself back with the blood and guts and all that, but made a lot of money as Luke and Bush, the Bushwhackers, and very, very popular, as you said. The Beverly Brothers at that time were a fine team to put up there as heels, as bad guys. They had a cool finish that they would utilize on jobbers on TV. I remember they pretty much killed people with it. And but I don't know, man. I like Lanny Poff is a good guy, but I was never a huge Genius fan. Just not really my cup of tea. And I don't know whose cup of tea Jameson was. Oh boy, that's just bad stuff there. And whoever had the idea of putting the Bushwhackers with Jameson, oh wow, that was an idea.
Yeah, that's another pairing you don't really think back on too much. You remember it, but it's not one that, definitely not noteworthy from a career development standpoint for the Bushwhackers, for sure. So this was easily, I thought, the most skippable match on the show, without question. And then I think that after this, Mean Gene had a nice little interview with the Legion of Doom, who are going to defend their WWF tag team titles against the Natural Disasters. I mean, this is your classic Hoss fight here, and when you consider kind of where I guess both of these two teams were at this point in their careers, it's a notable match, but I think this was also an interesting finish with this one, because you had the Natural Disasters winning the match by countout, and then they're just going crazy as though they've never understood that that a match or that the titles can't change hands on a countout, or at least they couldn't in this match for sure. And so they're just going nuts after the match. You've got Shawn Mooney with Jimmy Hart and the Natural Disasters claiming that they should be the champions. Why aren't they the champions? They're posing with the belts after the match and all this other stuff. And I just thought that was pretty funny. But of course, Gorilla, in the best way Gorilla always did. Like, he had to throw in the line, well, Jimmy Hart's got them brainwashed. They think they won the titles by count out, and so that was a good line to throw in. But it was kind of funny to see them just go completely apeshit nuts about not winning the titles after winning the match by count out.
Well, yeah, Earthquake and Typhoon were never really portrayed as masterminds or geniuses or anything like that. So the fact they had Jimmy Hart managing them too, I thought Jimmy he was never exactly the smartest guy the manager out there either. Although he did hook up with Hulk Hogan for like the past, God, what's it been 30 years he's been at the Hulkster now?
Yeah.
Just kind of suckling off that teat. So, I mean, Jimmy's a little smarter than we give him credit for sometimes. But, yeah, this was... And I also think, as Jimmy Hart, I think he made a critical mistake here for putting Earthquake and Typhoon in this match. I know the tag team title is on the line and whatnot, but if I'm managing Earthquake and Typhoon, why wouldn't I put them in the Royal Rumble match that's for a WWF Championship? I mean, you got Earthquake, Typhoon, they're big boys. It's going to be tough to get them out of the ring. So if I was Jimmy, I think I would put them in that match instead and may put another team. Jimmy always had a bunch of people under contract he could stick in that slot. So just my thought.
He could have found someone else to go up against the titles here and convince them that by winning by countout they would actually win the titles. But that did not happen. And yes, that leads us into, and before we got to the main events, more interviews. Of course, this was the intermission point where we just had interviews all over the place. Of course, the one big notable thing leading into this was all the highlights looking back at Shawn Michaels putting Marty Jannetty through the barbershop window. Of course,
yes.
That's still a very memorable thing. I can remember watching that, like, just whatever show that was on, like, they played it everywhere on all those different shows after it. But I can remember watching that, and I was stunned. And if people always think back, like, if you didn't, just the build up and everything like that, it was incredible. Just the visual and all that stuff. That's certainly still to this day. We're talking about it, many years later, and it's still one of those things that you just don't forget, because I think just the visual, Shawn kind of turning to that point, it was that was quite an angle.
Yep, it's definitely sent Shawn Michaels' career in one direction, and it sent Marty Jannetty's career in the other direction. I think we can pretty safely say that. So they both went different ways afterwards. But and people still to this day sometimes think that Michaels super kicked the guy through a window. Nope, just threw him. Just threw him through. Gave him a concussion, by the way, too, which apparently concussions existed back in 1992. Who knew?
Yeah, well, and apparently the glass was working glass. It wasn't real glass like Goldberg had in WCW that he, put his arm through and nearly just, I don't even want to get started on that.
Did you mean call him Oldberg, or did I just...
Well, that's another, relevant thing, isn't it, considering what we saw on Raw this past Monday, so...
Lots of great interviews, too. You could say, this is back in the days before they had the scripts. They weren't exactly scripted back in this day, and most of the guys that had talk in there knew what they were doing, and they knew how to get their point across. Yeah,
that's for sure. And I wish, of course, it'd be nice to have more of that today. If you go back and watch like a show like this, and again, this is a show that's really built around one match, but if you go back and watch it, it does so much when you have these backstage things. And of course, at the time too, you had some of the best doing it, and Gene and Sean Mooney's back here, and they've got the locker background. Oh, the locker backgrounds! And they got the phone back there. Just what a scene it was for the interview segments here, but. That led us into the 1992 Royal Rumble match. And, Steve, I'm just going to go through, sort of randomly stop at different points throughout this to get through everyone in this match, because this is a pretty loaded Royal Rumble. I think when you look back on it from top to bottom, this is not exactly 1995, let's put it that way, where that may have been one of the weakest Royal Rumble rosters ever, but this one was stacked, and it started off with number 1, the British Bulldog, number 2, Ted DiBiase. They start things off, but in a quick turn of events, if you thought Ted DiBiase was winning, if you had your money in the betting odds in 1992 on Ted DiBiase, Bulldog just threw him out right away.
Yeah, DiBiase going out a lot quicker than you would have thought during that time period. The $1 Million Man was still somewhat featured a performer, and he'd move on to Tag Team IRS shortly after this and win the tag team titles. But it was surprising to see DiBiase go out this quick. And, of course, another highlight was this is during the brief period of time where he's accompanied by sensational Sherry.
Yeah.
And Bobby was always impressed whenever Sherry would enter the building.
He was. He would scream every time he saw Sherry. He would. His voice would get a little bit higher. And again, you saw that.
Well, could you blame him though? No. Two big stars to start off to with Bulldog and that's getting off to a pretty good start when you put Bulldog and DiBiase out there right away.
Yeah, and as we know, of course, Bulldog would have a nice little, I mentioned 95 a second ago. He'd have a nice little run, 95 Rumble. Of course, that led to number 3, which was Ric Flair. Bobby Heenan, just absolutely, we had said, I mean, his commentary, but he loses his mind when he realizes Ric Flair is coming out at number 3. And he's just, all of a sudden it's like this guy's mind just goes overload mode and he has no idea what to say, what to do. And just seeing Flair come out, that was quite a treat because, again, this is, such a big match. It's such a big moment to have him, in the spot. And to have him come out, that was a pretty incredible sight, just in a Rumble, having him here. Not exactly the same, I would say, Steve, for number 4, which was Sags from the Nasty Boys. Probably not the same effect you had when he came out, but nonetheless, the British Bulldog eliminated him pretty quickly, and that led to number 5, Haku, and this was another one where, anytime, like, Heenan's association with Haku, like we know, but like Heenan's basically saying, come on, Haku, like, anything can happen here, and then Haku starts going at Flair, and Heenan loses his mind. He's just, this is just the common theme throughout this thing, is just, Heenan's just unbelievable. Like, it is. It's one-of-a-kind performance here.
Haku notably had one of the better pile drivers I've ever seen during this match. He was only in there for like a minute 51, but he made a quick impact while he was in there. And I want to circle back real quick because we forgot to mention Jack Tunney's fantastic appearance here. Oh, Heenan with a couple of classic lines there. Jack on the take, Tunney.
Oh, Jack
Best present
Tunney.
since Noriega. Yeah, good stuff.
That's Jack Tunney was. They were still booing him too. Like, everybody booed Jack Tunney.
He was quite the authority figure too. The great thing about Tunney was like he wasn't a good guy or a bad guy. He was just incompetent presidents, pretty much, I guess you could say there. But he did well. I thought he was good for the role.
Number 6 was Shawn Michaels, and this was sort of that. You had Flair and Michaels just start going at each other, and I'm thinking ahead. I'm like, this is insane that we're watching this in '92. Of course, we know we'd get quite a few interesting feuds between those two over the years, but pretty cool to see them going at it here in '92. And then you had Michaels and Bulldog go at it after that, which, like I said, that kind of foreshadows your '95 Rumble several years later, knowing what those two were going to do in that one. So a pretty impressive group to this point. And then, of course, it gets even better because number 7 is El Matador. Tito Santana comes in, and you've got Heenan hanging on every offensive move against Flair. This is just quite a roster coming in. Some of these characters we see come in here. Barbarian comes in at 8, Texas Tornado comes in at 9, and then Steve, you see, Kerry Von Erich going up against Ric Flair, squaring off, and Flair's doing the flop. Just the different ones like that, like Flair Michaels, Flair Von Erich. Some of these others we're going to talk about in a bit. It was just to go back and watch some of these. This was such a group of talent in this match.
Well, let's not forget about the Barbarian either.
Yes.
The Barbarian, of course, didn't like Flair either, according to Monsoon. And he was like, of course, when I imagine me, Barry like me.
Yeah. I love
the Barbarian. There's a reason they call him the Barbarian. He's not a hairdresser on his day off, So, just good stuff. And one of the themes that would pop up during this Rumble, you'd see a lot of Ric Flair's old opponents from back in the day, Kerry being one, and we'll see a couple others come up here pretty soon.
And unfortunately, number 10, the Repo Man. Heenan's talking up Repo Man's plan, and I was just laughing at that too. He's like, he's got a plan.
Girl's like, he didn't know where the ring is. What an idiot.
Yeah, Heenan's talking about how he's just got this grand plan because he's the Repo Man and all this other stuff. That was just that had me cracking up. Number 11, Greg Valentine. Gorilla had to mention Greg Valentine warming up. He had no choice. choice but to continue talking about Valentine, how long it takes him to warm up, and all those other stuff. And Gorilla continuing to point out how long Ric Flair has been in the match at this point. And of course, Heenan's like, stop saying it. Like, stop talking about how long he's been in here, because it's freaking him out every time. Number 12, Nikolai Volkov, a legend. Unfortunately, he fell victim to the Repo Man, who eliminated him pretty quickly. Number 13, the Big Boss Man. This is where we start to see some eliminations here as Repo eliminates Valentine too. Repo Man getting the Kane spot here in this Rumble, just to shine. So he eliminates Valentine, then Boss Man eliminates Repo. He's done. Flair eliminates Bulldog and Tornado, and then Michaels and Matador eliminate each other. So that's where you start to see the ring kind of clear out a bit, and that's going to lead us to a pretty big spot here in a second. Number 14, Hercules. Herc eliminates the Barbarian, then Herc gets eliminated. Boss Man eliminated after missing a dive on Flair. And what do you know, Steve? Flair is on his own before we get our number 15, Roddy Piper.
Which was a bad sign for Ric Flair, because Flair, when he came into WWF, his first opponent was the Hot Rod, because Roddy was the kind of guy who would talk some junk about people, and him and Flair had an extensive history from way back that didn't need to be mentioned here. But they were two good opponents, and just when Ric Flair was ready to take a breather after eliminating all these people that had come out there before, how weird was it to see Greg Valentine and Nikolai Volkov as baby faces?
Yes. And
that's weird. That's some weird stuff going on there. And of course, Hercules also had an issue with Bobby Heenan from back in the day. But Boss Man was looking good in there. He was cleaning house, and unfortunately, he took a really bad bump to the floor. He snapped his neck on the bottom rope. That didn't look good. But just when Flair was, Flair had taken the flop, he was ready to take a breather. And sure enough, it's the last guy he wanted to see, Roddy Piper, and the fans go crazy. It's a great piece of business.
And Heenan declared Flair the champ after he was in there by himself. Heenan started to get up. He's like, all right, that's it. Right. Like, shut it off. Like, he's done. He wins everything. And Gorilla's reminding him that's not how this works. So Piper and Flair go at it a bit. And this is, again, where we start to really see some talent walk into the ring here. At number 16, we see Jake Roberts. Just that
evil Jake Roberts at this point. Very evil. The man who slapped Elizabeth, for God's sakes.
We're going to go back and put this on one of those reviews at some point. Just that entire feud between him and Savage, and we'll talk about Savage here in a second, but that was something. Just to have this trio in the ring, and then, of course, to mess it all up, here comes number 17, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, but I kid, another legend.
That would have been a nice tag team match, Piper and Duggan against Flair and Roberts, and that would have been pretty good, and yeah, definitely the three-way spot, though, with Flair and Piper and Roberts is, one of the great moments there with, Jake trying to hit the DDT on Flair. Piper makes a save, and for the first time that I can remember in a long time, Bobby Heenan saying nice things about Roddy Piper. Thank you, Roddy. Thank you, Roddy. It's a kilt. It's not a skirt. It's a kilt. And then 5 seconds later, when Flair is Jake in the figure 4, Piper starts stomping away on both of them. Heenan just like, oh, you no good creep. You skirt wearing freak. It's not a kilt, it's skirt. It's just great stuff.
I thought just this, the way this match is put together, like, this has to be a Pat Patterson thing, right? Like, there can't be any doubt about this, because like getting Flair on his own, like we said, having some of his former foes just kind of where they're placed in this match, and then having Flair on his own, then having Piper be the person come in after that, and then, like you said, you go to the three-way spot with Flair, Piper, and Jake. It's incredible, and that again, one of the reasons why Pat Patterson was a master at this kind of stuff, because I don't know how you do this, because I could never figure out how to make like a flow like this when you have 30 guys, you're trying to weave in all these different things, but this was a perfect example of how to do it masterfully, for sure. Number 18 was IRS, number 19, Jimmy Snuka, and then number 20 is The Undertaker. So how about that? The Undertaker, he threw Jimmy Snuka, he just threw him out quickly.
Right, yeah, he just knocked that man right the heck out of there. It's pretty good. And Undertaker actually kind of got a little jobbed here, because apparently the stipulation was that Undertaker and Hulk Hogan were get later spots in the Rumble because they were the two former champions, so that's and necessitated this whole thing. And Undertaker ends up getting 20 is a fine number, but not quite as low as he was hoping for. And of course, the Hulkster got a much better number because, well, he's a Hulkster, for God's sakes. But in any event, the Undertaker was a man who was already making an impact this early in his career, and he was on the verge, of course, of switching sides and becoming a babyface.
He did okay for himself, I think, throughout his career.
I mean, he had a little decent. He had a little bit of a run there.
He's okay. Number 21, Randy Savage comes in. Of course, like you mentioned earlier, he goes right after Jake and eliminates him. But in the process, like, this is where Gorilla and Bobby are losing their minds, because they're like, well, wait a second. Like, Savage, he's over the top here. He's eliminating himself. And so, like, they're losing their minds here, because they're like, okay, this guy just eliminates himself.
Like, how are we gonna explain this? And Bobby comes up with this half-baked, oh, well, apparently, yeah, you have to have somebody throw you out, which they went with it. Like, oh, the girl's like, well, I'll have to take your word for it. And, of course, in later years, we learned that, no, you don't have to have somebody take you out. You can just go over the top rope.
And we also learned that Savage had some spots in Rumbles that weren't exactly the best, because 1 year later, I remember this one vividly, where it's him and Yokozuna, and he goes for the pin on Yokozuna, and he gets thrown out. Like,
yeah, Yoko ticks out, and Savage flies over the top rope. Oh, I remember I did a bunch of podcasts about Royal Rumbles a few years back with my buddy, the Voodoo Penguin, and I had not actually seen the 1993 Royal Rumble in full until watching it for that. And when I saw that spot at the end, I just burst out laughing. It was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. Oh, just good stuff. But yeah, Savage completely, he did a standard gimmick where he like jumps over the top rope, because he always does that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Undertaker had to come out and knock him down and throw him back in the ring and act like, oh, yeah, that didn't happen. So that's okay. We're good.
Love Savage, but 2 years straight here in the Rumble. Did not have the best moves in terms of trying to win. That's for sure. So, like you said, he does come back in. And number 22 is the Berserker. What a character.
Now, there's a guy who knows how Royal Rumble works, because his finishing move was throwing people over the top rope.
That's exactly right.
So he knew what's going on.
I thought he was the favorite as soon as he came in here at 22. I wasn't sure. Vince loves his ancient history, and so listen, I could have been surprised by maybe him going with the Berserker here, and the Wild man running wild there. 23 Virgil. I didn't think he had. That would have
been a bigger surprise if Virgil won.
I was going to say, I didn't think his expectations for me were not as high.
Yeah, they lost interest in Virgil by this point. He had a nice little run on DiBiase in '91, but by the time that feud was over, it was pretty much it for Virgil.
Yeah, the pop he got after winning that match against DiBiase, a little bit different than what he got coming out for the Rumble here in '92. Number 24, this man really should have won it if you really think about it. Colonel Mustafa, he should have won this whole thing. And set,
better known, of course, we all know him as Sheiky Baby, and let's be honest, Colonel Mustafa, not the more remembered of Sheiky's personas. That whole business with him and Slaughter and Adnan. I mean, it got some heat back in the day. Whether it was the right kind of heat, who knows? But now I thought it was kind of weird, because everybody freaking knew Iron Sheik. That was everybody knew who that guy was, and him kind of flip flopping from Iran to Iraq was kind of weird, if you ask me.
It was also incredible to me to think about that he was in this Rumble, and like you could tell, I mean, like he was hurting in this Rumble, like the way he got. Who was it? I want to say Savage, I think, eliminated him, but like he eliminated him in that very soft way, like he's just sort of laid him over the top, and he just kind of sat down, but like to think that he was in. Well, of course, he never got eliminated, but to think, like in 2001, he gets a shining moment in the Rumble at WrestleMania 17. That's at least he got his comeback.
Which he had to win that because he couldn't take the bump over top rope.
Right.
That's the issue there.
That was the thing. But at least he had more success in Battle Royals down the line. Number 25 was Rick Martel, and Gorilla could not stop talking about Rick Martel because, of course, at that point, he was the person who had the longest run in there from a time standpoint. That would get beaten here, but Gorilla was really playing that up for sure there. And number 26, Hulk Hogan, who comes in immediately, just starts running wild, of course, and he clotheslines Undertaker over the top, then eliminates the Berserker, so there goes that chance. Virgil and Duggan basically eliminate each other. I want to say one tried to eliminate the other, and they both end up falling over. So they're both out. It was
time for them to leave, so just like, see you later.
It was like, all right, let's get these two out of here. Because they had to make way for number 27, Skinner. Skinner. And
the alligator man, yeah.
What a gimmick that was. Skinner.
I mean, he liked to chew that tobacco, and if he spit that juice in your face, it's gonna be all over. I'm telling you.
He got some pretty big spots too. I mean, he was featured pretty well. Not in this Rumble, but just in his career, he had some nice spots. There, Heenan just on another level. I put in my notes at this point. He was just thinking about all the different talent in there because Hogan had just came in, and then number 28 is Sergeant Slaughter. Skinner gets eliminated. That leads us to the final two entrants. Number 29, Sid Justice, and number 30, the Warlord. So. You've got some hosses in there at this point with Sid
big
and Warlord.
Big boy, the Warlord especially was looking Warlord is looking especially big here, even by Warlord standards.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to save this note for last, but let's go ahead and get to it right now before we talk about the finish of this match. Also, roaming through the Observer, I found a great paragraph from Dave Meltzer about his thoughts on this being the first major pay-per-view show well after the anabolic steroid testing that had supposedly been implemented in the WWF. And so he said there were a few things to note. First, the use appeared to have increased since Survivor Series and Tuesday in Texas. It appeared from here that about half the guys were in the middle of some kind of a cycle, and maybe 18% appeared to have been off, at least for a while. I don't know where he came up with this 18%, but this is like math on another level to me. Maybe 18% appeared to have been off, at least for a while. The remaining 31% either wear costuming that makes it impossible to tell, IRS, the boss man, etc., or may have been on or off, but one can't tell for sure. I was cracking up reading this. Like, it was just, what a paragraph this was.
IRS and the juice would have been something else. It's not a waste of time there. But wow, just Sid Justice, of course. Sid was I remember he was expected to get a big push here because he just came over from WCW and he had that look that Hulk Hogan kind of had that Vince liked to have in his big stars from back in the time. And he really could have been, and he still won the WWF title a couple times later on. But I don't know, things just never quite went as well for Sid as you thought they could have. And later this year, I think he wound up going to play softball or something. There's a whole thing, but interesting Sid spot at the end too. We'll talk about. Yeah,
he got a huge pop when he came out. Like you said,
sure.
he met. Everyone they were on board at that point. They loved Sid, and that led to the sort of final finishing sequence here in the match. Hogan suplexes Flair on the outside. Slaughter gets eliminated. Then Piper eliminates IRS. Sid and Hogan work together to eliminate Warlord. And then Sid eliminates Piper and Martel. So Sid running wild here. That led us to the Final Four. And Steve, I was thinking about this. There's probably some I'd have to really look back at it. But off the top of my head, the Final Four here of Hogan, Flair, Sid, and Savage. Like, that has to be the best Final Four in Royal Rumble history, right?
That's definitely up there. I'd have to look at some of the other ones too, just to make sure. But I mean, as far as four guys there, you think that any one of those guys could win? Hogan, Savage, former champion, Sid coming in off the big push, and Flair coming in off big push too. So like at that point, if you're sitting there watching, you're like, okay, any of these guys, anybody can win here. Not like in later years, you might have some Final Fours there too that would stack up pretty well. But honestly, usually you kind of know who's going to win.
Yeah, it felt like there was always like one of those kind of odd Final Four choices at some point where they'd have different people. And I remember the one vividly, and I don't want to say it was odd because I love Mr. Perfect, but was that 2002, I think, the one Triple H won, and Perfect was like in the Final Four there, and I was rooting for Perfect. I love Triple H coming back, but I was like, come on, Perfect. I think... Yeah. Looking at this was, man, just to see these four as the Final Four.
I had some high hopes for that Perfect comeback run too, but things did not end up going well there.
No, it did not.
Not at all.
They did not. And of course, Perfect was not a factor here because of injury, and so he was with Flair.
He's the executive consultant for Ric Flair.
So he was, in a non-wrestling role in this one. That's the Final Four. Flair eliminates Savage, and then Sid eliminates Hogan. Hogan, once again, acts like a heel, pulls Sid's arm down, And that allows Flair to eliminate Sid to win this thing and to win the title. I don't even know if we ran into the match, but like this was for the championship. And so Flair wins the title. But Hogan here, my goodness, like this guy in Royal Rumbles, we talk about Savage. I mean, this guy, all the heel tactics for what was, this babyface for the longest time. We know he'd eventually make the perfect heel, but I mean, it's like, what did he expect here? Sid legally eliminates him, throws him over the top, and then Hogan loses his mind as though Sid did some underhanded tactics to knock him out of this match. He just threw him over the top.
And Hogan knows that the match is every man for himself, and everybody knows that Sid was doing the proper thing there to get rid of his opposition. And one of the most talked about things from this match still to this day is the way that the crowd audio was somewhat changed in later airings on video and whatnot. Because at the time, the fans were they were feeling Sid. They're liking Sid. They did not mind Hogan getting eliminated, and later on, they would kind of sweeten the audio a little bit to make it look more like the Hulkamaniacs were furious and outraged and whatnot. You can still see everybody like standing up and whatnot. Yeah,
Yeah.
So.
I would have loved to like talk to someone in that building and just be like, what was the exact, like just the sound? I'm sure, yeah, the differences were obvious, and it was, man. Which we know, what the next year and a half or so would hold for Hogan, of course, as a top, kind of babyface act. But this was another where you just looked at it like, why should I root for this guy? Like, he gets eliminated fair and square, and then he's the one that causes Sid, the guy that maybe I'm cheering for, to get eliminated. Why do I want this guy? Why would I want to cheer him over Sid? It makes no sense.
And yeah, and they went that way with it too, where they had Sid turn heel and join up with the great Harvey Whippleman, of course, as his manager, and which led to the Hulk had his big retirement match at WrestleMania 8, which of course was the last match he ever had, and we never saw him again.
Yes, he was done after that.
Obviously, which again, then you're kind of thinking like, okay, so why did we bother turning Sid for that? But then Sid ends up disappearing anyway, so the whole thing just kind of it didn't go. Nothing there went the way it was supposed to go. I think is the best way to sum all that up.
Yeah, the fallout from this entire thing, you have them at WrestleMania, Hogan and Sid, and you had Flair and Savage, which again, as the Final Four, makes sense. And that Flair Savage feud, now that's another one that
was good.
That was a classic. That worked out. Yes, that worked out very well for those two. But this was just overall, this entire match, like we said, with the talent that was in there. And, for Flair to win this match, as someone who, had not been there that long, and just to come in, from the other company and to win this match and just become the guy, have the title, win the title via this match, that was something. And it's just one of the most memorable. For me, it's my favorite Royal Rumble ever, probably, just from top to bottom. Just the match itself. With Heenan's commentary, his reaction after Flair wins this thing is just awesome. This was one that I always think back on, and I'm like, maybe there are some others I could watch back, 01, ones like that. Maybe the entire card is a bit better, but just from a Royal Rumble standpoint, this was special.
Oh yeah, it's number one for me. It's one of my favorite matches of all time. Like we said, this roster, for most of the rosters, there are a couple duds in there, I'll admit. Like there are a couple guys in there you kind of scratch your head about, but for the most part, you got all the major stars from like the 1980s there. Just up and down, just name a star and they're there. It's an amazing thing to see. Still, even it holds up really well today. And the commentary, Gorilla and Bobby Heenan, I don't think there's ever been a better announced wrestling match.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think this is, for Heenan, for all the great moments he had, I think this is the very top in terms of what he did, and really just his chemistry with Gorillas goes without saying. It's just the best there's been. These two, just the way they worked off of each other, pretty awesome for sure. But that was the 1992 Royal Rumble here, as we look back at some of our favorite Royal Rumbles heading into the 2021 Royal Rumble. Steve, as you look ahead, do you feel like the 2021 Royal Rumble is going to supplant the 1992 Royal Rumble as your favorite ever?
It's pretty long odds, man. I'm not gonna lie. The odds are not great. I mean, hey, I'm always open to being surprised, and maybe they pull a rabbit out of their hat. But I would, you already got a couple of good names in there, like Bryan's in there. That's always good. You got a couple other people. You got the big match too between Drew McIntyre and Goldberg. That should be just a phenomenal piece of business. I mean, personally, if I'm booking that match, I have the bell ring, Goldberg run out to do a spear and get Claymore 1, 2, 3. That's what I do, but that's just me.
That would be it. Yes. So right now, we were looking at the betting odds. We put these on 411. The betting odds, as we're talking here, is that Daniel Bryan is the favorite to win the men's Rumble. I think Bianca Belair is the favorite to win the women's Rumble. So that's at least noteworthy.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah. So that could be interesting to see. But we will have Steve back on probably before the Royal Rumble to talk about the actual 2021 Royal Rumble, and we will not take any negative shots because the 1992 Royal Rumble was so great. Hard for anything to compare to it, but that was that. I mean, it's just like you said, just a masterpiece of wrestling. I think that's kind of the way you put it. So, but there's the 92 Rumble. As I said, we've been doing some of these retro reviews. We're going to do these every Friday. I'm sure we'll have Steve on again. I won't make him do the 95 Rumble because for me, that still stands out as one of the worst Rumbles ever. No offense to Shawn Michaels going from start to finish, but the roster in the 95 one was certainly interesting. I think 95 as a whole was kind of an interesting year.
Was that one with Doug? Was Doug Gilbert in that one? Which one was Doug Gilbert in?
Honestly, I don't remember, but I honestly thought about doing that one for this retro review series, and the more I look at it, I was just going to do it because I think it would be fun, because knowing that it was just not a great Rumble at all. And that was the one, though, I will say this, that was the one where they only did 1 minute intervals. So the match itself only lasted like 35 minutes. So I will give them that, is they knew they didn't have a great roster. And so the fact that it was only 30-something minutes instead of 60, if they would have went 2 minute intervals in the 95 Rumble, I may not be talking about wrestling right now. I may have just stopped being a fan. So I don't know, but it was not a classic, but we'll bring Steve on to talk about potentially some other classics in Royal Rumble history before we get to the 2021 Royal Rumble on January 31st. But as always, check out everything we have going on over at 411mania.com. Steve, what exciting stuff do you have going on there, aside from sending in your entrance for our ongoing 411 year-end awards for 2020?
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff. We got the top 7, we got the botched, we got the ROH reviews, we got I did the Raw review this week, which, by the way, 3-hour shows. 3-hour show reviews. God bless people like Tony. They're able to do Tony, Kevin, guys like that can do it every week, because even if it's a good show, like, man, that's a long time to be sitting there and writing everything down, man. I don't know. It's just me, but man, that's rough.
I've always said Tony Acero, MVP in terms of having to do the 3-hour Raw review every week. I have no idea how he does it and stay sane.
As much as I like AEW, but I was glad to hand off that dark show and the 16 matches every week to you. I was glad to hand that off.
Well, I will say this. There was a point there where I was getting a little worried, because there was one, I think, that hit 2 hours and 47 minutes. And I was thinking, man, I'm really worried about this show. But I will give them credit. They pretty much gotten back to no more than around 2 hours, which is still long for a bunch of enhancement matches. But I think they've done a really good job of sort of getting back on track in terms of the flow of it, because that one they did probably a month and a half ago that was 2 hours and 47 minutes. I started thinking, I'm in the wrong business or something, because, man, it was just a long show. But I think, that's what we say, like, long shows in and of themselves, like 3-hour Raws, it's hard, like, no matter who you are, because there's so much wrestling out there. And so, yeah, check all that out, 411mania.com. As always, we'll have the link to the GoFundMe for Larry Zonka's family in the show notes of this podcast. You can check that out in there and continue to share it if you can. Everything else, 411mania.com. You can follow Steve on Twitter. We'll have the link to his Twitter in the show notes, and the link to everything else you need to know heading into the 2021 Royal Rumble, all that coverage over at 411mania.com. So subscribe to the podcast, any podcast app you use, and thanks as always for listening, and we'll talk to you next time here on the 411 on Wrestling Podcast.